Resident Evil 4's Serenity is one of the most instantly recognizable songs in the franchise's storied history. Equal parts unsettling and disturbing, but also strangely relaxing and atmospheric at the same time. However, this song is not an original Capcom creation. In fact, its origins can be traced back to a sample CD originally released in
1998.
Well, that's an interesting coincidence. Well, anyway, the sample CD is called Pandora's Toolbox Dark Ambient Soundscapes, and it was released by a company called Q-Up Arts, but written, composed, and recorded by an artist named David Torn. And I was able to track down some photos of the actual booklet and jewel case, as well as the CD itself. Now, sample CDs are a bit of a unique thing in the world of audio, as they're not released like traditional albums or meant to be listened to from start to finish. They're actually just meant to be used as tools to create other musical compositions. And it seems that Capcom in particular were very fond of this track, as they used it in 3 different games throughout the 2000s. Devil May Cry 1, Monster Hunter 1, and Resident Evil 4. So the actual track that we're looking for if this were a traditional album would be track number 29, titled To Burble and Pine. And To Burble and Pine is pretty unique on this release because most of the other songs are very short, very harsh audio snippets, again, just meant to be used as tools in other compositions. To Burble and Pine almost feels like a complete song, and it has the length to match. And it definitely feels like Capcom agreed in this sense because, as you're about to hear, To Burble and Pine essentially just is Serenity. So although Capcom reused the sample several times, it actually made its way over to Akira Yamaoka's sound library as well for the Silent Hill 0 or Silent Hill Origins soundtrack. Now, to be honest, although it is strange that the sample was reused so many times, what's even stranger is that it's appeared completely outside of video games and in some places that you really would never expect.
Me seeing my wife cry was rough on me, so it was a very intense meeting.
So it does mean having a very open mind.
Yeah, so it actually made its way into an episode of Super Nanny of all things. I really can't explain that one. So this sample seems to be in a lot of different places. In fact, there's a whole YouTube video about To Burble and Pine being found in various media, and it seems that the people in the comment section keep coming up with stranger and stranger examples of it being used. It's been sampled in a hymn song, it's been sampled in a Korn song, I'll have those linked below. And on top of that, it just seems to be that it was everywhere in the late 90s and the early 2000s. So with that comes my next question. Who exactly is David Torn? And how much money did he make from all of these different companies sampling his work? So in doing some more research, it turns out that David is actually far more prolific in the music industry than I originally thought. He actually has writing and composition credits on 3 different David Bowie albums and has released and composed music for TV shows like Friday Night Lights and movies like The Big Lebowski, The Departed, and Three Kings. On top of having a very extensive discography that stretches all the way back to 1985. Also, just in taking a quick glance at his YouTube channel where he still uploads improvisational and experimental guitar tracks pretty frequently, he seems to have actually submitted a piece to the Biden and Harris campaign of 2020, which I just found that to be really interesting. So David himself is clearly well established in the music industry, which again leads me to ask, how much revenue is there in something like creating a sample CD, especially considering how many popular and well-known forms of media have used it? Well, it turns out that David himself has actually commented on a few of the uploads of Pandora's Toolbox, and according to him, he never saw a cent. When responding to a user asking various different questions about To Burble and Pine and its use in different forms of media over the years, David clarified and said the following. This one, meaning the CD Pandora's Toolbox, and Tonal Textures, another sample CD that David released, were never intended to be record albums per se. They were intended for folks to load in their samplers so that they could creatively modify them for their own uses. The rules of using them, though, were a limited license, not ownership of the samples. The person using it was not supposed to use them alone, unchanged, in a commercial work, nor in any piece of music with only one other instrument. On paying for the sample's use, the person who bought the discs agreed to the very basic rules of these licenses. He goes on to explain where the problem began. What happened, though, is that people began using it and copying it and distributing the samples individually and also wholly. While some were sold early on, not much later there were 10 times as many copied and distributed as the amounts sold. And as the internet distribution continued and professional film composers copied the samples from each other, the samples simply went flying freely through the film and gaming world and through the internet without my name attached to them, often without titles. So, no payments came to me from anyone for Pandora's Toolbox or for Tonal Textures. And the company that printed the original discs disappeared off the face of the earth as far as I know, but they belong to me. So to start, I want to say I haven't even scratched the surface on everywhere that I've found and other YouTubers have found that this sample was used. And I'm going to link to another video in the description that has more of an extensive list between the YouTube comments and the video itself, but let me just say it's been everywhere. Like I said, it's been in a hymn song, a Korn song, it's been in a movie called The Cube, and several other examples. I'm sure people are going to continue to find examples of it being used. But it's just another unfortunate situation where an artist is not being compensated fairly for their work and the sampling of it. Sadly, this isn't even the only thing that Capcom stole for Resident Evil 4 specifically, as they recently had to make a settlement payment out of court for stolen photos in both Devil May Cry and Resident Evil. The photos that were allegedly stolen were used in multiple games, and they were used in both the menus and environmental textures. So I don't think we'll ever really know how many different versions or copies of the samples and tracks that are on Tonal Textures and Pandora's Toolbox are out there in the world, but one thing I do know for sure is that David is an incredible artist, and you should definitely check out his YouTube channel. He uses a lot of reverb and delay and fuzz pedals to just get some super interesting experimental sounds. A lot of things that kind of piqued my interest about To Burble and Pine the first time I heard it. I'm still hearing those type of tones from his channel, and I love that about it. So, drop him some comments as well. I know that, he seems to be pretty frustrated with the whole situation, but again, he's a very successful man. So I highly doubt that, he's dwelling on the past or anything like that. But I do hope that he at least knows that, a lot of us out there who've done the research, we know where the track actually came from. And even though it is most popular and most known as Resident Evil 4's save theme, we know that he's the person who originally composed it.